Hey everybody, Nikki the Death Doula here. If you would indulge me for just 30 seconds before we get into today's episode, I would love for you to hear from one of my dearest friends, Nicole Havelka, on her upcoming podcast, Just Rest.
Hey, I'm Nicole Havelka, burnout coach and host of the upcoming podcast, Just Rest, Burnout Tips for Everyday Radicals. This is for the folks resisting fascism, patriarchy, and grind culture who know that rest is resistance. My podcast idea is fully formed. I need your help to make it come to life. Back my crowdfunding campaign by September 11th and become part of the Just Rest community. Listen to a sample and check out the funder rewards at defythetrend.com/podcast. And remember, you are worthy of rest.
Hello, and welcome to Good Grief, the podcast dedicated to demystifying and destigmatizing grief with compassion and humor. I'm Nikki. I'm an end-of-life doula and a grief coach in Columbus, Ohio. And today, oh my goodness, am I excited. I'm very excited about this episode, you guys. Okay, and you will see it and hear it throughout this episode. Just the energy between the two of us was lovely because, oh my gosh, all right. Enough of that. Emily Hill reached out to me to be a guest on my show, and I was so excited to say yes. Again, you'll hear why, but Emily is a hospice social worker and chaplain. She is also an author and a public speaker, and oh my gosh, is she just lovely. And she had a very tragic experience of loss herself, which I'm not going to say anything else. This is her story, obviously. That's why I had her on. I want her to hear it. But wow, what an amazing person Emily is. And I was so excited to talk to her. And I've been wanting to get some actual hospice workers on here as well, just to kind of, talk a little bit about that, what that looks like in that space. But man, you'll hear, this podcast easily could have been an hour and a half long, but I'm not going to do that to you guys. I try to keep things succinct because I know I don't like to listen to hour and a half long podcasts. And I don't think some people do. Doesn't matter. Neither here nor there. Oh my goodness, you guys. I'm just that excited about this. Anyway, before we dive in, as always, I would just like to remind you that a great way you can help support me in this show is to become a patron over at patreon.com/Nikki the Death Doula. For as little as $1 a month, you can get early access to this podcast, get grief affirmations for a little bit more. You get a little bit more, get some Q&As. And if you want to be a VIP level, you get a free coaching session by me, Nikki the Death Doula, once a month. So if you would like a free coaching session by me, Nikki the Death Doula, come on over to patreon.com/Nikki the Death Doula. All the money I do receive from that goes to a special line item in my budget so that I can provide pro bono work out in the community. I do speaking engagements. I have a client I work with off and on. I do support groups. There are great things I do out there that I do at no cost because of my patrons. So please come over there and do that. And that's enough of that. Now on to today's episode, my conversation with Emily Hill. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back this week. I'm so excited to have a guest on my show. I have been aching to get somebody in this field here for quite some time. So I'm very happy to have Emily Hill with me today. Emily, would you introduce yourself to my listeners? Just tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Emily. I am a wife and a mom in my day-to-day life, but my 9 to 5, I work in hospice. I've worked in hospice for about 6 or 7 years. I've served in a couple capacities, both as a social worker and then as the spiritual care coordinator, chaplain. We're kind of called a few different things in that realm. But yeah, I spent time in hospice in both of those roles, having an opportunity to sit in that space with a lot of different people and have a lot of unique conversations and special moments.
Yay. So I love this because now I get to ask all the questions everybody asks me all the time.
Right.
So what drew you to this line of work? What made you say, I want to work in hospice, I want to be a social worker, and I want to be a chaplain and all the things?
So it's literally been since I was a kid that I've planned on working in hospice, which probably makes me sound like a weirdo to some
Not to
people.
me, to some people maybe, but you and I chatted a bit before. I
Yes.
think that's great. So,
But when I was 7 years old, my grandfather had lung cancer that metastasized to his brain, and he ended up at home on hospice. And we lived very close to them. But I remember during that time, and my family has shared a lot of memories because obviously, as a 7 year old, my memories are probably a bit foggy.
yeah.
But I moved in with my grandma and stayed with her for my grandfather's like final weeks, and my dad made me like a little origami nurse's hat, and I would help my grandma puree his food, and I would like read him
Oh.
my picture books. And so I just remember feeling so comfortable with end of life since I was little. And
Mhm.
so ever since then, I was kind of like, I think I should, lean into that. And so I
Mhm.
had always dreamed of being a social worker and working in hospice. And I kind of took a different route for a while. I did go the ministry route and worked in with children actually. And so then I kind
Oh,
of hopped from
wow.
cradle to grave and moved into moved into hospice care. But it is really my home. There is
Yeah.
no place I feel more comfortable than in that space with
Uh-huh.
people. And like what a privilege to be invited into such private, intimate moments with
Right?
people.
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, I don't have the same background you have, and I obviously don't do the same job you do at all. But I get asked that question a lot, and we were chatting a bit before, everybody's like, isn't that so sad?
Hmm.
No, I think it's so beautiful.
Hmm.
It can be uncomfortable, sure.
Right. And there's definitely sad moments.
Oh,
There's
absolutely.
like sad family dynamics and
Yeah.
sad circumstances, and like there is that there, right? Like it's
Yeah.
inevitable. But I think if we really embrace kind of like the full scope of end of life, that there
Yeah.
is a lot of beauty in that. There's a lot of sort of some of the miracles that we
Mhm.
see in birth, we can sort of see on the flip side in death if
Yeah.
we're open to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we are called doulas.
Hmm.
Death, as you
Right,
well know, death is
right, right.
very much a labor. So,
Hmm.
having a coach to kind of help work through that with you is just invaluable. So,
Hmm.
and you're right, it doesn't have to be sad. It can be beautiful. It can be sad.
Hmm.
I know I've had many different experiences with people at end of life, and some have been beautiful and some have been difficult and some have been scary. And
Hmm.
what has there been any experiences that have really stuck out to you? Anything that was really either just perfect or just awful, or any fun stories you want to share with that?
Oh, there, yeah, I mean, there's been kind of the full spectrum. There have definitely been some really beautiful opportunities and experiences with people. I know there was, not to like give away too much of anybody's personal
Sure.
information, of course, but there was one time when we had a set of twins, and one of them was on hospice, and
Oh,
neither of them had ever been married, never had kids. They still
wow.
lived in their childhood home, and one of them was going to be gone soon. And it was
Wow.
epically heartbreaking, but it was also
Sure.
so beautiful to watch this sister care for her twin, and just the connection that they had was just something I like have goosebumps just thinking
Yeah.
about it.
Oh,
And it was
yeah.
from years ago, but that was one of the most beautiful death experiences I've been able to walk through someone with, just because of that really intimate connection that I think
Hmm.
maybe only twins can
Yeah.
understand. I have had some scary ones, though. I'm sure you've had it too, where at end of life, a lot happens inside of us, both
Mhm.
from, I think, a soul perspective, from a psychological perspective. And then, the person who is approaching end of life is experiencing a lot that we can't quite understand. And sometimes that does come out in
Mhm.
scary ways. I've seen
Yeah.
people have moments that, require medical intervention, and seem to be maybe even of a different spiritual
Yeah.
level. And those stick with you too, right? To walk through that with someone. I've definitely had some of those that I'm like, oh, I'd be okay if that never happened
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, same. Yeah, I've definitely had some not smooth not smooth
Sure.
end of life
Hmm.
experiences. So I'm curious, have you ever in your time, are you still currently working in hospice?
Yes. Hmm.
Okay. Have you worked with a doula before? Have you ever had a doula
I have
present?
not. I am so intrigued by it. I've looked it
Oh,
up different times because I thought of like getting the certification
yeah.
myself and
Yeah.
everything, but no, I have never had the opportunity to work with a doula.
Oh, wow. Um, I would like I would never tell somebody what to do with their life, but there were a lot of people in my training who worked in hospice who are either
Hmm.
nurses, social workers, who didn't want to like necessarily be a death doula, but just wanted that understanding under their belt a little
Hmm.
bit more of like what we do and just add a layer to their service to their clients and their patients.
Oh yeah.
So don't be afraid to check it
Right.
out. Pretty cool. If nothing else, it's just time well spent getting to be among other amazing people who work at End of Life.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, my favorite kind of people.
Yeah, yeah. So you had a personal story of loss, if you are comfortable sharing that with me.
Yeah, yeah. I It's one that I like to share, not because I'm thrilled that I've had the experience to share, but because I think as somebody who has been comfortable with end of life, who works in the end of life space, I think I sort of naively thought that like I had grief all figured out. And what I should have known better, is that every grief experience is just like so different.
Yeah.
Um, that sometimes it really does catch you off guard, even if
Oh
you
yeah.
are like a grief professional.
Mhm.
But so for me, I had experienced loss with grandparents. My father-in-law had had a really difficult battle with cancer, and so I had personal experience with grief. But the one that really kind of like knocked the wind out of me was a miscarriage that I experienced a month after my husband's vasectomy. So not to be like too TMI, but I had wanted another baby. He didn't. So we sort of agreed that he could get his vasectomy, but we would throw a Hail Mary pass beforehand. And so when that miscarriage occurred, it was um, really layered, right? Like I was grieving the loss of a baby, but I was also grieving the loss of like never having a baby ever
Right.
again. And so it was this sort of big ball of grief that just
Yeah.
hit me out of nowhere. And it really took a while to kind of navigate through. Because I think for me, I
Sure.
am a person of faith, right? Like I'm a social worker, I'm a minister. And so I think a lot of my comfortableness with end of life does come from that sort of faith-based perspective,
Sure.
and some of the beliefs rooted in that. But the miscarriage really kind of flipped that on its head, where
Yeah.
then I was questioning my faith, I was questioning,
Sure.
all of that. And so it was just like a whole big hot mess of grief for quite a while.
Sure. Yeah. And first of all, I that pregnancy, infant loss, miscarriage, that's something I have no personal experience with outside of like some close friends that have been through it. Until I started, I'm on the board for a nonprofit. Sorry, my cat really wants to be on the show
That's
this
fine.
time. I'm gonna move him. I'm gonna leave that in. Uh, my listeners are used to hearing him. He's been, I was gone for a while, so he's been screaming since I got home.
Oh,
Anyway, yeah, I'm on the board of directors for a nonprofit that provides support for women who've experienced miscarriage, and I've learned so much just being here in a volunteer capacity and being around Cami, who started it. She was a guest on my show a while back about miscarriage work, and like I said, outside of a couple friends I know that have had one, I've had no personal experience, and I have no way to understand just how devastating that is. I can
mhm.
only imagine how devastating that is.
Yeah, and it is difficult. And I think recently we've become a little bit better about talking about pregnancy loss and miscarriage. And I know for me, mine was very early in the pregnancy. So because of that, and because I've had friends who have had later in pregnancy loss and things like that, when I looked at my own experience, I didn't feel like I could share. I felt like it wasn't
Sure.
enough of a loss
Hmm.
to kind of warrant the grief that I was feeling. And so it was a really complicated, I almost felt
Yeah.
shame mixed in with the guilt that I was feeling. And so for a long time I like really stayed silent and just kind of allowed it to sink deeper and deeper into like my core, right? And
Yeah.
my husband didn't get it. Like he's a very loving, understanding man, but like he was kind of like, well, I guess it wasn't meant to be. And so he didn't understand the grief that I was feeling. And so, we ended up in couples therapy, all
Oh my
sorts of stuff. Like it
gosh.
was, I mean, when I say it was a mess, it was, I mean,
Yeah.
everything just sort of imploded through
Wow.
that grief experience.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that, and also for bringing up this whole grief comparison crap, because I hate that. But
Yes,
I'm guilty
we
of
do
it too.
it. We do.
Of course, I've talked openly about my journey with grief when I lost my brother on this show multiple times, and how at the time of his passing, like I was obviously very upset by it. My brother,
Mm-hmm.
my only sibling, died.
Mm,
And but in that moment, all I could see was my parents just lost
mm,
their child. My niece, my nephew just lost their father.
mm,
And I couldn't, I just didn't know how to. I'm like, Mike, I'm just the sister, right? And he and
mm-hmm.
I weren't even especially close, especially at the end. We had some issues,
Mm,
as
yeah.
siblings do towards the end. And I just thought, well, their grief is so much more important than mine.
Mm-hmm.
I,
Yeah,
I have since
we do that
learned.
all the time.
I know.
Yes,
And
we do.
and so thank you for sharing how, that affected you with, maybe it's not as bad for me because my pregnancy wasn't as far as along
Hmm.
as some of these others. So we're
Yeah.
so guilty of that, aren't we?
Right. We are. And I think, and that's why I love having conversations like this, because I think the more, the more people who are comfortable in that space talk
Mhm.
about it, I think it lets other people have a chance who maybe are a lot less comfortable
Yeah.
kind of given space to share, because
Yeah.
it's scary to open up about grief and loss, because it makes you really vulnerable. It's
Absolutely.
sort of, and even to share like I'm experiencing grief with someone who I wasn't all that close to, that's
Mhm.
difficult to share too. And you kind of have to open up a lot about yourself and your
Yeah.
relationships, and maybe things that you kept pretty buried. And when you start talking about grief, a lot of that does bubble to the surface. So I love having conversations like this, because I do think it opens up the space for people to be like, yes, me too.
Yeah.
Or to say, I experienced that, but it was totally different. Let me tell you about it. Because
Yeah.
I just think that's so important for
Yeah.
healing, for processing, for
Yes.
all of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, you just described exactly why I started this podcast at all. Was
Mm-hmm.
it 3 years ago now? Just for reasons like that. Because I know I felt once I started realizing how much I was grieving the loss of my brother, I thought, well, again, but it wasn't my husband, it wasn't my
Mm-hmm.
parent, it was my brother. And I found some groups online, like on Facebook and in person for sibling loss. And I started
Mm-hmm.
just seeing all of this. And I'm like, and I still have those moments of like, there was a lady I met who lost her twin sister.
Mm-hmm.
And some people that were like, my brother was my ride or die. We spent every day
Mm-hmm.
together. We were texting constantly. And I'm like, yeah, but my brother and I weren't that close. But I just
Right.
started hearing other people tell stories similar to mine about
Mm-hmm.
relationships similar to mine and my brother's. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm not crazy.
Right. Yeah.
And my feelings are valid.
Right. Right. Yeah, because grief is like weird because it's universal, but it's
Yeah,
also unique. So it's
yeah,
like it's like finding that space though where you can connect from that sort of like, yeah, we've all experienced grief, but
mhm,
then also sharing kind of the nuances of your grief story
yeah,
without playing the comparison game, and sort of being able to like leave the shame and the guilt and
yeah,
kind of all the other messiness that comes along with loss. I
yeah,
think is just like so important, because we cling on to that stuff and carry it with us then kind of through the rest of our lives. And then when we're approaching end of life, I think we're trying to unpack
yeah, yeah,
all of that. And it's just so much that we like don't have to carry with us through
yeah,
life or through death either.
yeah, yeah. And that's one of the things I appreciate doing the most for my clients is helping them have those moments of letting those things go. And
Mm-hmm.
not even necessarily like letting it go, like just get over it, but
Right.
finding a way to accept the things
Mm-hmm.
that are never going to happen, or
Mm-hmm.
make those forgivenesses, even if you can't forgive the person directly, or if they can't forgive, just find a way to have that closure of that,
Mm-hmm.
forgiveness or validation or whatever it is, because so many
Yeah.
people don't see that until they're at the end of their life.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I wanted to briefly mention or kind of touch on something else you'd mentioned a few moments ago about your faith being a little bit shaken with this.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that so much with people.
Mm-hmm.
When a big loss happens, I feel like people who are of faith, and not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily Christianity, but any
Sure.
strong faith, will have that their faith is completely shaken, or they lean into it even more.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like I've experienced a little bit of that myself too with some losses I've had. Like how can these things keep happening?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Um,
As a chaplain
I would,
and a
yeah,
minister?
I get asked a lot, why is God allowing this to happen? Or, kind of getting into that space of trying to make sense of it through a lens of faith or spirituality, or just this belief that there is some sort of higher power or kind of spiritual force outside of ourselves. And I wish I had the answers, like I
I
wish
know. I
I
know.
wish that I had like the answer key to all of those questions, because I would love to have them
Yeah.
for myself. But I've loved being a chaplain because it does allow me to not have to have all the answers, but to be able to kind of ride along with them as they navigate figuring out what they can figure out. But I do think that a lot of what we wonder about is probably not going to be answered
Mhm.
in this space, in these bodies.
Right.
And we all have different sets of beliefs. I love this one Celtic tradition that someone had taught me, where they talk about there's these thin places in life. In the Celtic belief, they have some physical places, but a lot of it is more times of life. And one of those being death, where the person who is approaching end of life gets to experience both this reality and the other side of eternity.
Oh,
And they sort of leave it a little vague, kind of what the other side of eternity is. Because again, like, I think anybody who claims to know has probably figured it out completely wrong.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um, you
Yeah.
know, but so I love that. And as a doula, you've, I'm sure, experienced times when people are in those final moments where it does seem as though they are experiencing something beyond
Hmm.
this realm. And so I do think that, like, a lot of our questions, the person who is maybe not able to answer them, who's there in front of us and in bed with their eyes closed, they might have the answers for us.
Yeah.
And so someday I hope to
Yeah.
kind of be in that position to have the answers,
Yeah.
when you kind of have one foot in each realm. But, I think that faith is one of those components
Hmm.
of grief. Whether you have a strong religious background that you've practiced, or whether you lean into more spiritual practices like Reiki, or anything along those lines. Or maybe you've just never really thought about it.
Yeah.
I have met with a lot of people who are um, you know far along in life, and they've just never really had any thought about what happens next, or
Yeah.
how did this world come to be. But a lot of that does come up when we're
Yeah.
approaching end of life, when we're considering loss, because I think it helps. I think we're looking for comfort in it.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, because there aren't always clear cut answers, I think sometimes we can end up kind of finding more disconnect.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's,
Yeah.
as a person of faith, it's been hard for me to navigate,
Hmm.
um, in my own life and in walking with others, because it loss does not always make sense. Death is not always
Hmm.
beautiful. There are times where it's just heart wrenching, and it feels like, if there is a loving higher power, I don't understand their presence in this moment. And so
Yeah.
I I do think faith is one of those really tricky pieces of loss. I have found my way back around to it. I
Yeah.
stumbled in the dark for a while, but I respect kind of where everybody
Hmm.
lands with it, because it is it's tricky.
It is. It is. And honestly, you gave the answer that I would always appreciate hearing. And I have heard from I have some friends that are ministers and I have
Hmm.
friends that are chaplains. And whenever somebody tells me that I don't know, I would
Hmm.
rather hear that than somebody lie to my face
Sure.
or make some platitude just to make me feel better in the moment. Which I mean,
Right.
it's nice to be comforted, but don't
Hmm.
tell me some BS just
Right.
to make me
Right.
feel better, right?
Yes.
I I love hearing people who anybody who just says, I don't know.
Hmm.
And that's, I mean, that's the answer I'll give because I've had clients ask me too, like, what do you think is waiting for me on the other side? And I always tell them, I can't answer that for you.
Hmm.
I will walk you right up to the door. And as far as walking through it and what's on the other side of it, that's going to be something you have to do
Hmm.
without me. And, just know that I will still hold you, with you
Hmm.
metaphorically. But yeah, I don't know. None of
I
us
don't
do.
I I don't
None of us
either.
do. If somebody does, somebody call out and let me know.
Right. I know. I know. I love reading the things about people who've had like near death
Yeah.
experiences, or they
Yeah, yeah,
flatline and kind of come back. I am
yeah.
like unbelievably fascinated by
Same.
those, because I believe it.
Hmm.
I take to heart what their experiences
Yeah.
were, and I just think it's
Yeah.
incredible, because I think there's a lot that goes way beyond what, you
Mm.
know, us as people
Oh,
can
yeah.
can even begin to comprehend. And I love getting to
Yeah.
hear what other people think. Like oftentimes when people ask me for the answers, I would much rather hear like, well, like, what do you think about it? Because I've learned
Yeah.
so much about um different religions, like the Muslim faith or
Hmm.
reincarnation, and the Jewish faith and what they believe. And I've changed my perspective on what I've thought about
Yeah.
eternity and the afterlife and faith, because I've been in the presence of people who've had different experiences, and my mind and perspective has been open. So I think the more, again, like loss and grief, I think the more we
Yeah.
talk about it, the more we can
Yeah.
like learn from each other, and
Yeah.
kind of
Totally
glean
agree.
information and perspectives and insight from each other, and not feel so alone when
Yeah.
we're struggling, and when we're kind of asking those questions and going through the murkiness of all of
Mm.
it.
Yeah. I had such a unique and amazing experience once. I host a death cafe once a month here in Columbus. Have you ever been to a death cafe or?
No.
Okay. So, and I've talked about them a bit, but death cafes are basically just a place where a gathering of people who can talk about anything around death and dying with no judgment, right? There's no
Mm-hmm.
agenda, there's no like no one specific topic as long as it's, in and around that. And
Mm-hmm.
I had only been doing these for like maybe 6 months as I was relatively new. And I happened to have in the room with me someone who's a Christian, someone who is a practicing Jewish person, and a Hindu
Mm-hmm.
person, and a couple people that were like either agnostic,
Mm-hmm.
atheist. And somebody broached the question of what do you think happens after we die? And I was like gripping the table, like, oh man, I hope this doesn't go off the rails. It was the most respectful and beautiful conversation I have,
Oh, that's amazing.
because the Hindu person brought it up because they were talking about reincarnation, things like
Hmm.
that. And everybody else just kind of chimed in with what they thought. And they were all very different, but
Yeah.
every person listened raptly and said, "Oh my gosh, that's so fascinating." And we're asking each other questions.
Yeah. I
Nobody
love that.
argued. Nobody said you're wrong, and everybody left happy getting. That's why I love having these conversations, just to
Yes.
get to hear other viewpoints, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
beautiful.
No, me too. I love it. Because sometimes, like in hospice care, like you're always offered a chaplain because it's part of Medicare guidelines and everything. But a lot of people will kind of initially refuse
Yeah.
the chaplain, because I think they picture like a minister with a tie on, and there to like
Yeah.
convert or something,
Right.
at end of life. And then I show up and I'm like, not like that at all. And so
Yeah.
I think then it's being able to have those conversations where it's okay to say what you believe. It's okay to
Yeah.
ask questions. It's okay to wonder and worry and doubt and like
Hmm.
all those things, because we all do it. I
Oh
don't
yeah,
care what you what you say out loud. I think we all worry one out all those things. So like
absolutely.
better out than in, is
Yeah, totally agree.
kind of my perspective.
Yeah, I and with all the people I've worked with, when once they're on hospice, they've been asked like, "Would you like a chaplain to come?" And I've had so many people be like, "No, I don't really need that." And I always
Hmm.
encourage them. I'm like, "Just have one. Just talk to them. What you don't have to. Obviously, you're allowed
Right.
to say no, but I would encourage you just to start a conversation." And almost everyone is like either take them up on that and said that was great, thank you, and didn't necessarily need them back.
Hmm.
I only ever had one that was not great, not great
Yeah.
interaction, but
Yeah.
that was a
It happens.
one blip. Yeah, it was, I
Yeah.
mean, she was well-meaning, but anyway.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, well, this has been so amazing. It's there. I just love getting to talk to other people who do
I know.
it.
I think we could like talk forever.
Oh my God, this could go on for 12 hours. Do you have any like grand words of wisdom or something you just dying to share with my listeners about anything we've talked about?
I think when it comes to end of life, which if somebody's listening to this podcast, my assumption would be that they are either on the kind of entry point into end of life. Maybe they're walking alongside someone who is approaching a terminal illness or something that appears to be leading toward end of life. Or maybe they're on the other side where they're in that depth of grief and trying to find a way out of it, or try to heal and try to move in some direction kind of forward from that place of deep loss. And so for those listening, I do just encourage you to find a place where you can share, whether that's in your family, a friend, online. Just find a place where you can comfortably share, because I do think that that is like one of the biggest paths to healing, because I've been a person who has kind of kept it to myself and felt like I could kind of work through it alone, and
Yeah.
like it does not it does
Yeah.
not work. So whether you need to find a good counselor, a support group, there are so many
Mhm.
ways to share, even if it just starts with journaling
Yes.
and
You,
start
yes.
there, because that's a little safe,
Yeah.
right? Like you
Yeah.
don't have, you can burn the
Yeah.
pages after you write on them and nobody
Absolutely.
will
Yeah.
ever see it. But just start whatever feels comfortable, start sharing, because I promise that it will be a healing experience, not just for yourself but for someone else,
Yeah.
every time.
Thank you. Yeah. Find a death cafe.
Yeah, I'm in Pittsburgh, so Columbus is not far.
I'm sure there's death cafes in Pittsburgh. I'm quite sure.
I'm gonna look them up.
Yay. And it's like it sounds weird to say it's always a good time, but it's always a good
Hmm.
time.
I
I've
get
I've
it.
always had
I
a
get
lovely
it.
time with them. Thank you for sharing all that, and thank you for reminding people that it's okay to talk about these things because that's how we heal. So,
Hmm.
all right. Well, now that we're at the end of the episode, since I know you know what's coming, but I'm gonna pull a random card from the death deck here, and then I will let you answer it, and then I will answer it. And oh God. Okay.
Uh oh.
Oh boy. Okay. After you die, how long should your significant other wait before dating?
Oh boy. Um, Depends on how long he wants to be haunted, I guess. um, so I feel like at least a year before he gets like a Tinder profile. At least.
Oh, I must do a spit take.
Like I think a minimum of a year.
Yeah.
Anything before that feels gross.
Yeah. I I've made my husband promise me to remarry if something ever happens to me
Hmm.
because I don't think he can take care of himself. He's gonna kill me if he hears this. I'm like, somebody needs to take care of you, honey, because
Right.
I've been doing it for almost 20 years now.
Yeah.
Um, but I agree. Like, I think maybe wait a year. It really depends though, because and I've talked about this on this show. I've talked about it ad nauseum before about how everybody's grief is different, and there's the
Hmm.
anticipatory grief, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
I've known more than one person who's lost a spouse to cancer, and their spouse was dying for 2 or 3 years, and they were remarried within, a year or so, and people are
Yeah.
like aghast that they would dishonor them.
Right.
I'm like, you don't understand that they lost that person well before we all the
Well,
rest.
that I kind of thought that too, because I've worked with people who have had like early onset dementia.
Mhm.
And I've actually had someone who was on hospice and her husband had a girlfriend. And like she was,
Mm.
because she had dementia for a decade.
Yeah.
And he was still relatively young. And so, it's hard to it's hard to judge because
Yeah.
I can't understand that
Yeah.
experience. But like
Same.
if I were to die tomorrow, my husband better wait.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing about those deaths that, those long illnesses. People don't
Right.
understand that person like kind of died in a way
Right.
long
Yeah.
before their
Hmm.
body died. But
Yeah.
yeah, if I die suddenly tomorrow,
Right. Right. A
honey,
year.
wait like a year or
Yeah.
so, okay?
Yeah.
I'm sure he would. I'm sure he would
Yeah.
wait. I know him. He'd probably be like, I don't need a date ever again. That's what I would say, but who knows?
Yeah.
Emily, this has been lovely. Thank you so much for taking time to talk to me. If my listeners would like to reach out to you, is that something they can do, and how would they do so?
Absolutely. I love when people check into my DMs. I on Instagram am Epiphany every day. You can also check out my website, everydayepiphany.net. I'm an author, speaker, kind of all the things as a side hustle. So I'd love for you to check it out. If I'm your safe space to ask questions, I couldn't be more flattered. And I don't have all the answers, but I am always happy to chat.
Thank you. I will put all those links down in the description too for anybody listening, so you can just click away to your heart's content. Emily, thank you again. I have nothing but respect for you and everything you do as a social worker, as a chaplain, and just as a human being. So
Oh,
thank you.
thank you. Same.
Oh, thank you so much again, Emily, for sharing your story and your journey, your loss, and being so open and vulnerable about what you have been through. I know I appreciate that. And the whole reason I started this podcast was to make somebody out there feel a little bit less alone in their grief. So if somebody out there has had similar experiences as Emily, hopefully now you can feel a little less alone. Her information is down in the description below. I should have some of that on my website as well. If you want to check that out, you can go to nikkithedeathdoula.com/podcast. If you have a story you would like to share, you can also find merch like this great t-shirt right behind me. Yeah, check that out. I've got journals, stickers for your water bottle. I got one right here. Ta-da! Can't really see it. Sorry about that. Anyway, I've got a sticker on my water bottle and a few other places. I got one on my laptop. Doesn't matter. They're great stickers. Go out and stick them out in the world. And let everybody know that grief doesn't always have to suck, because it says that right on the sticker. If you have a story you'd like to share with me, please reach out. I'm always happy to have conversations with people and see if I can get your story out there to make somebody in the world feel a little less alone. If you really like the show, the easiest thing you can do is tell a friend. You can leave me a nice 5-star rating, write a little review on Apple Podcasts. That is a great way to boost me up in the algorithm so more people can find me and more people can, feel a little less alone and feel a little more comforted in their grief. So you can also find me over on Substack. I've got my blog and some great content over there as well. So all this stuff is out there. A lot of that stuff is linked right on my website, nikkithedeathdoula.com. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. And as always, your grief is yours, your feelings are valid, and grief doesn't always have to suck. Good Grief with Nikki the Death Doula is produced by Nikki Smith of Nikki the Death Doula LLC in Columbus, Ohio. Nikki the Death Doula LLC is for consulting, education, emotional support, and guidance, and is no way considered a funeral establishment or licensed mental health establishment. Scripts, editing, sound design, literally everything with this podcast is done solely by Nikki Smith of Nikki the Death Doula LLC, with the exception of the music. The music is Cheery Monday by Kevin MacLeod. Licensing information can be found at filmmusic.io.